So, is it recording? Okay, cool. Welcome to Stalking Awareness Month. This panel, Supporting Survivors, is the third of our workshops today. And my name is Priyanka. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm the Director of Outreach for the movement, and I'm going to be moderating the panel today. So all of our workshops today are for students, faculty, and staff to raise awareness of stalking behaviors, the impact they have on survivors, and all the campus resources that can serve as support for students who may be experiencing stalking. So college students are especially vulnerable to stalking, and right now in the COVID-19 lockdown, it has also made stalking easier in a variety of ways, including increased online presence and stay-at-home orders, making a survivor's whereabouts much easier to track. And in addition to this, many resources for survivors have been moved to virtual resources and can be more difficult for those who do not have access to those resources or reliable technology or Wi-Fi. And before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to honor the land that North Carolina State University was built on, and that land was originally stewarded by two indigenous tribes, the Tuscarora and the Catawba. Because we are virtual, I invite you all to unmute and call out or put in the chat the names of the traditional lands that you call home or where you find yourselves located today. If you're not sure, you can text your zip code to the number in the chat. And we hope that honoring the legacy of these native lands today, that we continue to remember the history of this land and deepen our work to break the cycle of colonization and oppression. We choose to acknowledge the history of these spaces and the places we occupy to understand that our collective history and to unlearn the harmful ways that we have been socialized in order to prevent future harm and erasure. So in addition to this, we also want to take a moment to recognize that stalking can happen to anyone, regardless of their gender identity, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, abilities, socioeconomic status, or geographic location. Stalking can also be perpetrated by anyone, regardless of gender identity, ethnicity, sexual orientation, abilities, socioeconomic status, or geographic location. And as we learn more about stalking, we hope to challenge all stereotypes and systems of oppression. We believe that violence does not happen in a vacuum and all systems of oppression are interwoven. When we learn about stalking and responding to those in trauma, many of the same principles apply for supporting loved ones who are experiencing or have experienced other forms of violence caused by sexism, racism, homophobia, and other forms of oppression. And because we are on Zoom, we have a couple of guidelines. So mute yourself if you're not speaking. Feel free to turn off your video if you need to get up and move around, and turn on your video if you can for discussions if you're in a place that you're able to do so. And please utilize the chat. We really want to hear from you. So use the message all participants if you want to answer questions, share reactions, express support, or ask any questions. And then if you are experiencing any technical difficulties or you want to have a private question asked, you can definitely privately message the host. And by participating in this workshop, you're agreeing to act respectfully and to adhere to the agreements outlined in this space. So we reserve the right to remove any disruptive participants or individuals who aren't participating in ways that honor our community purpose. So on that note, a couple of agreements for this space is definitely to listen and chat with respect. So when you're speaking, try to use I statements as much as possible to speak from your own experience. So actively listen, have an open mind, and listen to others to listen rather than listening to respond. And really try to be present and be aware. So be aware of your privilege when you speak and be mindful that others have had different experiences. And try to be intentional and come from a place of learning with an open mind. And try to be as present as possible by not multitasking during the training or turning off your microphone and video to do something else, unless of course something unavoidable arises. And really remember that stories say, lessons leave. We want to respect everyone's privacy, so please don't share any names when you're discussing things like secondhand trauma or specific things you may have witnessed or heard from family or friends. So feel free to pose questions like, what do I do if my friend, rather than using their name. We also do want you to share the lessons that you learn in this workshop from others, so please spread that knowledge. But it's also important to know that as facilitators with the Women's Center, we are responsible employees, so we are not confidential. That means if someone shares the details of an experience of interpersonal violence, it is our responsibility to connect you with resources through the Equal Opportunity and Equity Office, which is also known as the Title IX office. And lastly, definitely try to challenge yourself. Some of these conversations can be uncomfortable, but really try to lean into that discomfort and embrace the challenges and step out of your comfort zone. So when you find that you're uncomfortable, try to ask yourself why you're feeling that way. And finally, please take care of yourself. A lot of this content is really heavy, really upsetting. So we really ask that you take care of yourself. Whenever you need to, feel free to turn off your video, move around, step away, take a few minutes, do whatever you need to take care of yourself in that moment. And remember, if you find yourself feeling upset, you're definitely not alone. You can reach out to the host or the Women's Center helpline if you want to speak to someone, and they will definitely give you the support that you need. And feel free to hang out and talk to us after the workshop, and we can definitely connect you to any resources. So now we're going to move on to our questions from the community. So some questions have been submitted earlier this week, but if there's any other questions anyone wants to ask, please feel free to message them directly to me or put it in the chat. So now we'll start off with introductions for our wonderful panelists. If everyone could just say their name, their pronouns, and their role.
Maybe I'm supposed to start. Oh, go ahead, Janine.
Go ahead. I was going to say I'll start if you didn't want to. Go ahead.
Okay. Sorry. Lisa LaBarbera-Mascote. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the director of the Women's Center.
Hi, everyone. My name is Janine Kossen. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the associate director for interpersonal violence services.
Hi, everyone. I am Alexius Pearson, she, her pronouns. I am the interpersonal violence response coordinator.
Hi, everybody. My name is Carlyn Wright-Eakes. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Interpersonal Violence Prevention Education Coordinator with the Women's Center.
So what's your background and how did you get to this role? What services do you provide in your role right now?
Yeah, so I can start off and then pass it to my colleagues. My background is in a couple of different areas. So from public health and public policy to law and advocacy. So I come to my work with those lenses primarily and have done work, everything from working directly with students who are organizing for policies and programs on their campuses to lobbying at the national and international levels, working with refugee women and girls who've experienced violence, and then to my current role here at the Women's Center, where I am one of our primary survivor advocates. And, you know, along with Alexius, and some of the work that we, and some of the services that we provide here are to help students who have experienced any form of interpersonal violence, including stalking, understand what their rights and options are, helping them navigate their own healing and recovery. And that can look different for everybody, and we'll get into that a little bit later, but I'll pass it off.
I'll jump in the mix. So my background is primarily rooted into like research and understanding of law enforcement and community engagement, with a heavy presence when it comes to legal advocacy, supporting survivors of IPV, and it's including like child abuse, human trafficking, family violence, as well as some knowledge and helping with survivors who also need an immigrant services. So navigating that space to fully focusing on just support advocacy, stepping away back from full-fledged legal advocacy to where I am now as one of the primary support advocates. And as Janine touched on, get into that space, which we'll talk about later. The resources provided now can range from safety planning, supportive counseling, crisis intervention, and so on. So we'll dive into that later. So now I will pass it on to the next person.
So my background, I did my undergraduate degree in sociology and my master's in education. At many different points thought about social work, but ended up going the education route. Do a lot, and I do a lot in this role around supporting survivors, but I'm particularly interested in how you create change in communities. So my kind of studies and interest lies a lot in how to use advocacy and education to create change.
And I think I'm last. So my background, I have a master's degree in social work with a specialization in student community development and higher education. So all of my post-grad work has been rooted in higher ed settings, mostly large research one, both public and private. But I got into this work really through grad positions with prevention education. So, and I've been involved with interpersonal violence prevention education from grad school in some way or another throughout the course of my career. So I have experience working in housing, and doing kind of like immediate crisis response in a residential setting. And then I shifted into my role in the Women's Center about 4 years ago.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for the work that you do. So I think a starting question that a lot of us have is, what do I do if someone tells me that they're being stalked?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Priyanka. This is a very common question. And I think the thing that we most want to share with folks is it can be really hard to share and disclose something that's so private and personal to an individual. And so first and foremost, just thanking that person for being courageous and willing to share that with you. We know that the first person that somebody discloses to can make a huge difference in a survivor's recovery and their willingness to seek further services. So being that person who's supportive and acknowledging how this is impacting them and how they're feeling, and that can look so different for every individual, whether it's a physical impact, a social or emotional, or even just engaging in social activities and what that looks like. So really acknowledging that, affirming and validating that person, and letting them know above everything else that it's not their fault and that you are there to support them. It's also important that to be able to share resources. You as a peer, it's not always on you to have to figure out everything. So there are professionals who can provide that level of support that your friend may be looking for. So being aware of what those resources are, and that's part of what we'll talk about today, is how to get connected to those resources. And also, it can be very overwhelming for somebody to seek out support. So if you are in a position to do so, offering to accompany your friend to any resources that they do seek is really helpful for overcoming that barrier. I think particularly when we think about stalking, another thing that might be really important is to encourage anyone who shares with you that they're being stalked to try to save and document as much as they can. So that can be messages, text messages, phone calls, video, photo evidence, screenshotting anything. This can be really, really important for helping an individual make a safety plan, and or if they decide they want to report that behavior at some point, having that record and documentation is really helpful. And lastly, again, I would just encourage folks to remind anyone that discloses to them that they're not alone, that you're there to listen and provide whatever support they want. Your role is not to overpower and take control, but to be there and help in any way that your friend feels is helpful for them to make them feel safer. And just remind them of that continuously.
Those are all, I think, really good tips and really good advice. So I guess a follow-up to that would be, what are some things I can do to make a survivor of stalking feel safe and comfortable?
Yeah, so one of the important pieces when it comes to supporting friends and family, we always want to know, what can I do? How can I help? With understanding that this is a survivor's journey and you are there to be a support space, not to tell them what to do. As an echoing a piece of Janine's response previously. So when trying to support a survivor and make them feel safe and comfortable, first understand and accept and respect the fact that survivors of stalking can be dealing with trauma from their experience, which can impact their space and places that they feel comfortable in, and that it's up to them to measure and communicate, this is what I may need, this is what I don't need, this is what I'm comfortable with, this doesn't work. And being able to sometimes check our own spaces, our own privileges or wants and needs, and understand they may not align with the survivor and the friend that we're assisting. Some examples to make them feel comfortable is with stalking. A piece of it could be heavy social media, for example. So asking a survivor, is it okay if I post you? If it's okay if I take a picture with you, or if I post on your Instagram story or your Snapchat, or you posted a picture of yourself at, I love frozen yogurt. So if I'm at Sweet Frog and I tag my friend who's a survivor of stalking, I need to ask that before doing that. Because even though they may be a survivor of stalking and their perpetrator may be not connected to them anymore, they still may have got used to having to follow safety measures, and they still may be dealing with that trauma impact on their day-to-day life. Other things you could do, if example is offering to walk with them, if it's to class or the CAF, or if it's late at night and they feel uncomfortable walking to their car, or if you don't feel safe doing it, sharing resources about campus resources where an officer can escort them to their vehicle, and things of that nature. And just really, really understanding, the importance of meeting them where they are, understanding that they may not want you to come to their home or to their dorm unannounced, understanding that they may not want you to share personal information. It could be, hey, our common friend asked what you were doing today. I didn't share that because I wasn't sure how comfortable you would be, but maybe you want to reach out to them and connect with them yourself. And also just ask, just say, hey, how could I be a support space for you? And just really just listen and adhere to what they need if you are in that space to do so. And also as a friend, to make yourself feel comfortable. If you're like, I don't know where to begin, I don't know where to start, in addition to asking them, also seeking resources yourself for tips from people like us at the Women's Center, and getting tips on how to be a good support space.
So I guess as we're starting to get into this conversation about supporting a friend, how can I help someone avoid triggers that can bring back memories of their stalking?
That's a great question, and I can start us off on that. First, I want to talk a little bit about the word trigger. So the word trigger is something that's been kind of normalized and used a lot in everyday language. So when we talk about triggers, we're actually not just talking about topics or things that are unpleasant, offensive, distasteful, but really thinking about things that affect a person's physical and or emotional state and causes a sense of extreme overwhelm or distress. This can really impact their ability to be present in the present moment. So a trigger can cause anything from, anything like flashbacks, dissociation, panic attacks, any other emotional experiences. And I think another really important piece is that often, when we think about the way that the word trigger is used in kind of an everyday sense, it's also associated with this idea of being too sensitive. So really thinking about the fact that that's not what a trigger is, and that it is an actual physical or emotional reaction that is connected often to traumatic experiences. So some ways to support somebody that may have triggers that bring back memories of stalking or any form of interpersonal violence is really thinking about ways, how do you lessen, future flashbacks, anxiety attacks, dissociation. And one way that you can do that is by starting to identify any warning signs for triggers, or I often like to call them hotspots too. If the word trigger has a different association, like thinking for survivors, what are those spots, or what are the things that really catch you and kind of get you back into that experience or that feeling of trauma. So some of those kind of first warning signs could be anything from, maybe your chest tightening or holding your breath, squeezing your fists, starting to sweat. So really kind of becoming a little bit more aware of your physical reaction and what is happening in these moments that you're experiencing overwhelm or distress. And another thing is really kind of inviting curiosity around that and figuring out what is it that is, bringing up this reaction. So sometimes it can be a specific sensory feeling. It can also be an emotional memory. It could be a reminder of the event, or even an unrelated stressful experience that your body, in responding to stress, relates it back to that traumatic experience. So one thing you can really do beyond just starting to recognize when what your body is doing in those early warning signs is figuring out what specific things are triggers for you, and this is really different for each individual person. And then from that you have more awareness, and with more awareness you're able to respond. So some things you can do is start making plans of really thinking through how do I want to respond, or what are the things I'm going to do when I start to feel my hands clamming up, or if I know walking past a certain building or a certain dorm is going to cause me some type of flashback or memory. What are some other ways that I can avoid that, or at least be aware and start working towards having support around moving through these situations? So again, I kind of think about really trying to be curious about it, being really kind to yourself, recognizing, again, this is not being quote unquote too sensitive. These are very real reactions to harmful experiences. So just paying attention to it. And then as a friend, a lot of this work has to be done, by a survivor and on their own time, and it's got to be their own choice. But as a friend, you can continue to support and motivate and affirm them. And it really depends on what type of support that they might want. I also highly recommend for survivors, if you are experiencing symptoms or, things like panic attacks or flashbacks, nightmares, dissociation, connecting with counselors or people who are really specialized in trauma-related therapy. So there's a couple of different types of treatment that are really effective for victims of stalking, sexual assault, any forms of interpersonal violence. Some of those include cognitive processing therapy, exposure therapy, EMDR, which is eye motion desensitization and reprocessing. That one's very, very effective with survivors. And then also DBT, which is dialectical behavior therapy. So again, survivors have to be in the place where they're deciding that this is what they're ready to do. But as a friend, you can encourage and support them on that journey.
That was a really helpful explanation, Carlyn. So if I'm in a situation where I have a friend who has been a victim of stalking, and even though they're no longer being actively stalked, it has caused them to start acting differently, how can I help them feel more like themselves again?
I can jump in there. And I think Carlyn spoke a little bit to some of those pieces also, but I'd start really with patience, grace, and understanding, right? So the best way to support a friend is to let them take the lead on what being themselves again looks like, right? And just being patient and understanding, because really healing looks different for everyone. It could be a straight line, it could be a curve, it could have starts and stops. So it really depends. So being a friend, I think, looks like checking in and being the best support that you can, and really letting them take the lead and asking, right? So making sure as you're doing things together, are there places that are triggering for them? Are there activities or things that might cause a flashback? And being conscious and taking that into account as you're making plans or driving places or suggesting restaurants or things like that. And always checking back in, right? So making sure things feel okay and that they're getting the support from you that is the most helpful. And I would say, even to start, like as a friend and they've shared this with you, thanking them, right? So knowing that they've trusted you and thanking them for sharing the experience and letting them know that you're here to provide whatever help and support that you can as they move through their healing.
I think we had a really great follow-up question in the chat. Someone asked, how do you set healthy boundaries with a survivor?
I can jump in really quick on this and then open it up to anybody else. I think setting boundaries is a really important part of supporting survivors. And often in this work as an advocate, I try to show and not just tell. So I'm modeling my own boundaries, and I'm modeling the things that are important to me, whether that is, signing off of work at a certain time, or making sure that I'm keeping up with my own therapy appointments or my self-care plan. And that way, hopefully that's also kind of showing and modeling for the survivor ways to take care of yourself. Again, this can be really, really challenging because if somebody is relying on you, or you feel that they're relying on you, it can be really hard to say no. But finding ways to do that lovingly, and usually what I find works best is saying, for me, saying, I'm not able to sit with you right now because I have, something else going on or something coming up. Can I check in with you tomorrow? Or could we have coffee tomorrow? Or can I FaceTime you later if it's a friend? So just affirming that you love and care for them. But it's not your responsibility to be there 24/7 to support them. And if anybody else wants to jump in on that, please do.
Awesome. So kind of on that note, going back to what we talked about earlier with online dating, what tips do you have for students for healthy online dating?
I can start that one off as well. Sorry, I talk a lot. Yeah, so online dating is definitely something that has become a lot more commonplace. And even so, during COVID-19 and the pandemic with stay-at-home orders, just thinking about a lot of ways that previously you would meet somebody new. So maybe at a bar or a restaurant or, at in-person events on campus, a lot of those options are not happening right now. So some of the dating websites are actually showing, increases from 25% to over 80% of usage of their services. So recognizing that this is, increasingly common ways that people interact and meet and are developing relationships. So some things that you can do, being really aware of the photos that you post. Can recommend putting a different picture on dating profiles than you use on your other social medias. That way nobody can do a reverse image search. So basically you want to be able to protect your own information so that you are, you're controlling how much you're sharing with that person. You also might want to be aware of photos with any type of information about where you're located. So if you live right next to a coffee shop, and you post a selfie at that coffee shop to your profile, that can also be giving, some indication of where somebody could find you. And then another recommendation is to try and engage in different ways before you meet somebody in person. So potentially, doing a video call. And then if you do decide to meet somebody in person, one thought or idea is that you could try, a social distance date in a public place before you're sharing your home address. So somewhere that feels open, that you're not giving away more information than you're ready to. Also recommend letting a friend or a loved one or somebody in your life know when you're about to meet somebody new, potentially saying how long you plan to be out and if there's a certain time that you're going to check back in with them. So, something that me and my friends do is, often just good night texts or I'm home safe. So just something that lets them know that you're okay. You can also work with your friends or community on having, exit strategies or code words or something if you're going on a first date or you're meeting up with somebody from online, so that you can just send one text and that person, whoever it is, knows how to support you or what to do to kind of help you disengage from that situation if it feels unsafe. Again, if something is very unsafe, don't hesitate to call the police or engage with other resources. Sometimes also it can really help to write out your boundaries so you know them, because in these moments where we're in different situations, sometimes our brains aren't going to fire quite as quickly as we might hope that they do. So thinking through, if I'm not comfortable with this and it goes to that level, how do I want to respond? So thinking through scenarios, writing things down, talking to your friends about how you feel in those moments. And then trusting your gut. So if you're kind of getting a feeling that something might not be right with somebody that you're messaging or that you've met on an online platform, follow that. And it's okay to say, I don't want to speak with you anymore. It's okay to not respond. Some things you can look out for would be things like vague answers. If it gets very romantic or very intense quickly, possessive or jealous quickly, and if somebody asks, specifically for personal identifying information. So if they're asking immediately for your address or where you work, anything like that. Another flag might be if they're not willing to call or connect face-to-face before meeting. So those are a few tips, and there's definitely a lot more that people can look into. And again, just trusting your gut and making sure that people are supported around you.
That was a really great answer. I see another really good question in the chat if we want to switch gears back to kind of supporting a survivor of how can we regain body and self-confidence after an abusive relationship, especially in terms of intimacy?
So I'll jump in for a little bit and then somebody else can jump in after me. But regaining body and self-confidence after an abusive relationship, especially in terms of intimacy, and full transparency, the journey is going to be different for each survivor. And each plan or each journey is going to be catered to them. So you have some spaces where some individuals and survivors have to go to counseling, right? May have to get assistance with therapy, or they find reconnection through their own spirituality, find different spaces through mindfulness, and different practices. And so when we're getting that, it's first really important to say, okay, this is how I feel. If I'm not okay, how do I navigate this space that's more comfortable for me? And for some people, it may look like having a support group space, or having a tribe versus a singular caregiver. Other spaces, in order to find healing, it may require them to get into music or poetry to be able to express themselves and appreciate their body, and understanding that whatever I've experienced, it doesn't change my identity. I am who I am, and I get to reclaim my body for myself, and I get to narrate that story. So I've seen experiences where survivors navigate it differently, and you may have some survivors who function inward, and begin to work through that in their own process, or function outward in telling their story and living their truth. But I definitely would say, in having that journey looks like for you, figure out what works. And some of it is through music, art, spirituality, or also clinical assistance. So I'll pass it on to a colleague.
I'd say also, in addition to everything that Alexius mentioned, one of the things I often work with my students about is understanding that what happened, as Alexius said, doesn't define you. It's also not your fault. And so there are a lot of tools that we incorporate into our conversations with students around, setting your own intentions and creating a mantra for yourself. So like, what can you say every day, having like a catchphrase almost, like how can you start to build that confidence every time you walk out the door, or every time you look in the mirror, you see a Post-it note that reminds you what your mantra is, so that in some ways you can start your day with an intention to set it in an affirmative way and manifest the strength that you want to bring into that day. We can often do this through like vision boards and things where you're really like picturing what you'd like for your life or your experiences or your next relationship. I think another key thing is, especially in terms of intimacy, is how you're communicating with your partner when it's time, and when you're feeling, are you ready? Are you not ready? Communicating why you may not be ready, and also, that it's okay to change your mind. If you think you're ready and then you're not, that's okay. And if you are able to communicate that with your partner in whatever way feels comfortable for you, that can help set a safe space for you when you're starting to explore becoming intimate with somebody else after a trauma.
I'll just jump in and add as well, kind of going off of what Janine just said, really taking your time and not rushing yourself or pressuring yourself, or, being aware if you feel pressured by anybody else. Um, and that intimacy can look like a lot of different things. So cooking a meal with somebody in some ways could be more intimate than anything physical or sexual. So finding, the ways to engage and connect intimately with people that feels good to you, and really going on that of, listening to your body of what your body needs and what feels good to you in that moment. And it's going to look different for everybody.
Awesome. So I know we've talked a lot about supporting a survivor or being a survivor, but on that same note, I think stalking behaviors are often really normalized and even romanticized. So how do you even know if you are being stalked? Or what if a friend is being stalked, but they don't recognize it as stalking? At what point should you seek help or should your friend seek help?
So I'll take this one. Very great question, very packed question. So, in some cases, typically, like, for example, earlier in our first session, we watched a 25-minute video of different stalking scenarios and how it's romanticized in the media. And in that space, you have some stalking that's very apparent, and their actions is very noticeable. And in some cases, some people may wonder, why is this stalking? But if you have that feeling, if you have to wonder, then listen to that gut feeling, listen to the intuition, because typically if you have that feeling that is happening, the more likely than not, statistics show that is happening. So stalkers are like pretty consistent and lack healthy boundaries. We talked a lot about boundaries, and oftentimes they do not respect those boundaries set forth by the survivor. So some ways to identify some common forms of stalking. Some examples can include an individual like following or showing up wherever you are unannounced, or you're not telling them where you're going to be. It could be sending continuous unwanted or inappropriate gifts, or continuous texts and calls. Sometimes it can come from that person's actual number, or you may get a strain of blocked phone calls where if you answer, the person hangs up, or they leave a voicemail with silence. Or even in some instances, I'm aware of people just send pictures of random things, sometimes of animals or your car, or sometimes send pictures from, you being at a work location or a gym, things of that nature. Other things could include damaging personal property. Like if you come outside and there's scratches on your car one day, and then next day it's a tire. And if it's things like that continuously, or a mailbox, those are things to really look forward to. Another instance could be if you're noting personal items or objects are missing. You have some instances where, if I'm talking to a survivor about signing up for USPS mail alerts, and it sends you the mail that you're supposed to be receiving that day. Some instances, mail can be missing, and it could be about personal documentation that involves, addresses or medical or social security, things of that nature. And so if you get a lot of things like that, in other ways, if you physically can see the person, if they're frequent locations, contacting you verbatim, threatening you or family members, or sometimes even your animals that you may have in your custody. Or as well as if it can look like, okay, this person's contacted me directly or come by my home or job, but they're constantly posting personal information of me on social media. That's also a red flag to look for. Or if you notice a person that you're not familiar with, in some cases, a private investigator may be following you unknown for a stalker. There has been cases where stalkers don't do the work themselves, but hire someone to do it for them. So in those spaces, those are some things to look for in some stalking behaviors, or things like edible arrangements, stopping by your classroom, continuously to offer you to walk you to your home after you continuously say no. Those are things to look for. Now, one piece that's interesting that I feel like sometimes may not be discussed a lot is the hero complex. You have some perpetrators who intentionally create some scenarios so they have to play the hero for you. Like, got a flat tire. They probably caused the tire, or you can't find your wallet or your cell phone and they intentionally misplaced or hid it to have an excuse to be your savior, to be that protector. So that's also something, if it's continuous that you find yourself in a situation where this person's having to come save the day, there may be some intentionality behind it. Now, if you do have a situation where your friend has been stalked, is being stalked, or maybe in a dating relationship with their stalker and may not identify it as such because of how heavy it's been romanticized due to pop culture, it can make it hard for them to recognize it. And then it also creates a space where, okay, how do I have this conversation with my friend without seem like I'm attacking them or attacking the person they are engaged with, which is very similar to various forms of violence, right? If you have a friend that's in an IPV relationship but does not see it as such, or if there's unhealthy and toxic boundaries but does not recognize it as such. So it's really just opening the space based on the relationship with the connection to have a conversation. And in some places it can be direct, in other places not so direct, but making sure it's from a non-judgmental space, really focusing on the perpetrator's actions, and sharing information or providing examples. So if, for example, you have a friend who you're concerned about the friend, him or her, they were ending the relationship. It could be like, okay, well, I'm going to a program, for example, by the movement. It would like for you to come with me because I don't go by myself. And we're talking about healthy boundaries, if that's okay with you. Or I want to have a movie night and we end up watching 50 First Dates. Let's talk about that movie and how that resonated with us, and creating comfortable, safe space to have these conversations without making it seem like an attacking mode. So that way your friend does not shut down. And if the relationship is deeper between you and your friend and a connection, then you can just voice your concerns honestly and be like, are you okay? Are you uncomfortable? Do you feel pressured any type of way to be in this connection with this individual? And if so, share information and resources, whether it's from campus or in the community, to let them know that if you feel okay, I'll leave it here. Here's some information just in case. And if not, just know that I'm here for you when you feel in the safe space to come to me and talk to me. So really just leaving that revolving door open for them when they can recognize it, and want to acknowledge it and work through it. So, because also we have to respect the fact that sometimes having that conversation with your friend can potentially put them in danger as well as you. So you want to gauge it with care, because if they do go to that person and let them know, hey, my friend thinks you're stalking me and this, that, and the third, that person may use manipulation to sever you all's relationship, or escalate the behavior out of fear of losing power and control over the situation. So when it comes to stalking, survivors typically if they recognize it, tell a friend or family member first before they reach out to service providers. The moment when a person is recognizing that they are being stalked, it is important to immediately start learning about stalking and taking steps to protect yourself. However, that looks different for every person. And what that means is some survivors, as they're being stalked, may not go straight to law enforcement, and that's okay, due to their comfort, discomfort, fear of safety, or identities that may not resonate with going or feeling safe with law enforcement. So in this space, it's important to connect to resources and advocates such as ourselves at the Women's Center, in which we can talk to them about campus resources, community resources, safety planning, crisis intervention. So that way we can talk to them about tech safety, or talk to them about keeping evidence collection and how to track information and steps that they can take. So I always say yes, if possible, as soon as you're aware, talk to a family friend, get connected. However, if a person is in immediate danger, I would recommend contacting 911 for safety and life-threatening issues. And I see that we have a question in the chat. Is it okay if I read it? Or should I? Okay, great. So the question is, how seriously should one consider stalkers who are trying to stalk someone else? What I mean is, many people give out false phone numbers when pressed. What if that phone number is yours? who's not intended to stalk you and not stalking the intended person, but technically the person is a stalker. Okay, so like make sure I'm understanding correctly. For like example, if a person is out at the, I don't know, out at a party or a movie and someone asks them for their number, they give them a false number and it ends up being, you know, an actual number. The person starts texting that thinking they're stalking the person they met at the event. Got it? Okay, cool. It depends. So if that is a number, it is your number. If you want to if you communicate to that person that, hi, this is not the person that you're looking for, expressing that information and let them know, hi, I apologize, this is just not such and such, you have the wrong number, and hopefully the contact stops. If not, trying the premise of blocking that number. And if it continues, you can have a few options if that person shares identifying information to file a report, or if you feel comfortable changing your number, or even downloading some text safety apps that screen your calls, which prevents continuous spam numbers or block phone calls. So that is also an option. But if the concern is if that person looks up your number, it actually finds out who you are and begins stalking you by identifying information about you, then I would say go ahead and get contact immediately to services. And if my colleagues have any comments on that, I'll pass the mic.
I'll just add that stalkers or abusers can find very creative ways to harass the person that they are trying to harass. So if that means going and meeting other external people and giving your number so that that person is contacting you and sending you unwanted messages, that can still be traced back to that first person, and can be useful in developing a case if you wish to take legal action or other action.
That was a lot of really great information. And thank you all so much for the work you do at the Women's Center. So if someone wants to meet with you, what does a meeting look like and how do you connect?
Yeah, I'll start here. So I'm going to pop in the box here, ways to get connected with us. So typically right now, because we're in COVID times, we're all remote. So the best ways to get in contact with us are either through our 24/7 helpline, the number's in the chat, or we also have an accompanying advocate email, which is responded to during business hours, and that's also in the chat. The other way that a lot of folks get connected to us is they might go to another resource on campus first. And so then they might learn about the work that we do and get a referral through, for example, the counseling center, or maybe a friend or a professor or the Title IX office even. Of course, when we're back on campus regularly post-COVID, most of the students that come to us will come to us through our walk-in services. We are located on the 5th floor of Talley Student Union, and we are open 8 to 5, but we see walk-ins between the hours of 9 and 4, Monday to Friday. And it can be as simple as somebody coming in to the space and just asking to meet with an advocate. And then what we do is whether we're virtually or in person, the meetings are going to vary depending on what a student's needs are and where they are in their experience. But certainly, of course, we will welcome you into the space, whether that's through a Zoom call or in our private offices. And we're going to start just really by introducing ourselves, spending a little time about talking about what we do. And the services that we provide. And then a very important thing that we're going to have at the beginning is a disclosure of our reporting obligations. And you heard some of that at the beginning when Priyanka talked about our reporting obligations. But this is really important so that we can share what obligations we do have to report to the university and be very upfront with you about that so that you can make the best decisions for yourselves about what, if any, information you're wanting to share with us. And then we'll also answer any questions you have about those reporting obligations so you get a good sense of what the process is and what your rights and your options are before even getting into disclosing anything that you might share. So that's how we'll start the conversation. And then from there, we will really give you all the time and space you need to share anything you might choose to share with us. And most of the time, we're not going to interrupt you. We're going to, probably ask if it's okay if we can take notes, because there may be things that we want to come back to and ask some clarifying questions around, just so that we can get a better sense of your exact experience, and that helps us identify what resources may be available to you depending on what you share and what your status is at the university and some other things. But we're not going to probe for deep details or ask you a lot of questions outside of some clarifying questions. Our role is not to investigate. We're not there to make you retell everything. We're really there to be your support person, to affirm you, to help you process what you might have been experiencing. A lot of times students will come to us and they'll be like, I'm not really sure what's happened, but here's some things that I'm concerned about. Like, can we talk through that? Other students will come and they'll have very clear understanding of what happened to them. So it really will look different for everybody. And so we're really there to kind of pick up on cues of what you've shared and identify some avenues that you might want to pursue. And again, those are some of the things that we've talked about earlier. If you share, for example, that you're really struggling making it to class, you're struggling to focus while you're in class, or you have decided to go to court and you need to miss class, like, we can work with you and your professors to obtain academic accommodations for you, including excused absences or extensions on assignments or makeup exams or things like that. Other times we will be providing emotional support and helping students with coping strategies and grounding exercises. Some of the things that we talked about earlier around how you can regain your confidence and body image and things like that. Those are things that we work through with students. We will also be there to accompany you to any support services that you may choose to engage in, whether that's on campus, off campus, hospital, police. We'll go to court with you if you choose to go and pursue a protective order or pursue criminal charges. We can also go with you throughout any type of university administrative hearing you might choose, through an investigation and a conduct hearing. We can be there throughout that entire process for you and help you prepare. And really, we also, we're not experts in every single resource. Like, we can talk to you about things like what's the difference between criminal charges and protective orders, or between a criminal investigation and a university investigation. We'll talk through that. And then if you choose any of those resources, we will actually connect you to the experts who do that work, so that you can have those conversations. And again, we can be a part of that conversation with you and provide that ongoing support. But our role is really, we, particularly on campus, we work with a lot of support offices on campus, as well as in the community. And so we try to take some of that burden off of students. If you, need those academic accommodations, but you don't want to ask for them, like, we can do that for you. Or if you want to get connected with emergency housing, but really don't know where to go, we can reach out to university housing and be that liaison and try to get those supports for you, or we can set up appointments for you. And so that way you can focus on your healing, your recovery, and your role as a student, first and foremost. And, so much of what we talk about in interpersonal violence is around how power and control has been taken away from an individual. And so we are very conscious of, we're never going to convince you or, coerce you or pressure you into making any particular action. We're going to be there to offer you the options and talk through pros and cons and help you maybe come to your think through what you want to do and help you come to your own decision. But we're never, ever going to say you have to do this, or this is the best decision for you. We're going to be there for you regardless of what decision you make. And even if that means you're taking no support resources on campus, we'll always be a support person for you. So that's a lot of what we talk about in our meetings. And, after the first meeting, We'll also include a wrap up at the end of everything we discussed, because sometimes a meeting can be short, sometimes it can be several hours, depending on what your needs are. And so you may not be in a place to really absorb everything we've spoken about. So at the end of that meeting, we're going to talk about, okay, these are the agreed upon next steps. I'm going to reach out to this professor, or we're going to get you an appointment with student legal services. I'm going to follow up with an email that's going to really summarize everything we talked about and also include contact information and the next steps, so that if at some point, 2 weeks down the road, you're like, I can't remember what Janine said to me, you can go pull up that email and reference it and have it at your fingertips. And then we'll also know that that's a lot to have absorbed and taken in a meeting. And so we'll give you a few days. If it's okay with you, we'll reach out to you again after a few days and just check in and see where you are, what your thought process is, how you're feeling, what support we can continue to provide if you want to continue. And I'll say, sometimes a student is very clear on what they need and want, and maybe they just need one meeting with us and then a couple of follow-up emails. Sometimes, I've been at the Women's Center for 3 years. There are some students I'm still seeing for, since the beginning of that time for 3 years. And so we'll be there for however long you need and help you navigate your healing and recovery in whatever way you determine is the best for you, and help you navigate that together. So bottom line is, we're here for you. I don't know if my colleagues want to share anything else about how those meetings go. Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, Janine. That definitely sounds like a really powerful resource. So if someone was interested in becoming a survivor advocate, what do you recommend that they do career-wise?
So I'll jump in here. I don't know if there's really one specific path. So as you may have heard earlier, all of us came to this work in very different ways. Sometimes folks will pursue degrees in social work or counseling, or either higher education with a counseling focus, with true intention of just doing survivor work. And sometimes you'll be in higher ed and you'll fall into it because it becomes a passion, or you're an undergrad student and you're a peer educator and you've become trained and gained content knowledge, and now you're volunteering at a community agency after you get out of college as well. So there's so many different ways to get connected. That can start with donating to your local rape crisis center or signing up to volunteer. So you could, if you go to, and I think we popped in the chat earlier, the RAIN website, you could click on volunteer for wherever you are in the country and find out where your local community agency is. And there's typically a hotline and a way to sign up to volunteer, which also comes along with training. So that is also an easy way to get connected. I know the movement is currently recruiting for new members. So that's another way to get connected to advocacy work. So I think overall, it's really about training, empathy, and commitment, and a desire to be a support for those in need of support at that moment. So you can come into it many different ways. It's really about commitment and desire.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And that's all the time we have for today, but I hope you'll be able to join us for our final session of the day, which is a panel at 3:30. It's on the same Zoom link, and it's with the Movement Peer Educators, which is a student-led organization from the Women's Center that aims to end interpersonal violence on our campus. And we are currently accepting applications. I put the link in the chat if anyone wants to apply. And as always, we know this content is really difficult, so remember that you can always connect with the Counseling Center or the Women's Center or any other NC State resources. You can connect with the Women's Center by calling the helpline or emailing the Women's Center email, which is ncsuadvocate@ncsu.edu. And all of those will be in the chat below. And please fill out our evaluation so we know how we did, and we hope to see you all here at 3:30.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.